She never meant to dial the wrong number. But that single mistake dragged Amara into the ruthless world of Luca Romano, the most feared mafia king of Italy. What began as a desperate accident became a dangerous bond, one written in blood, betrayal, and forbidden desire. Now, trapped between her past scars and Luca's merciless empire, Amara must decide. Is he her captor, her savior, or the love that destiny carved out of chaos? Because in his arms, she finds both the fire that could save her life and the storm that could shatter it forever. Before we dive into today's thrilling story, I have one little request for all the new viewers. Please hit that subscribe button and join our growing family. Your support means the world, and it helps me bring you even more heart-pounding, emotional stories every day. Now let's begin. Amara Johnson pressed her back against the peeling wall of her apartment, her arms folded tight across her chest, as if she could somehow hold her crumbling world together. The stack of envelopes on the counter seemed to sneer at her with their red-lettered warnings: final notice, eviction, balance due. Each envelope was a dagger, each line a reminder of how close she was to losing the fragile life she had fought to protect. Her eyes stung from lack of sleep. The dim bulb above her kitchen flickered, humming in the silence. In the corner, a plastic bag filled with groceries sat half open, the milk already warming because she hadn't had the energy to put it away. Bills pressed on her shoulders like weights, heavy, merciless. She let her head fall forward, strands of her dark curls slipping free, brushing her brown skin dampened with sweat. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind refused. Images of her little boy filled her chest. Noah's small smile, the sound of his laughter when he played with his toy cars, the warmth of his hand in hers. He deserved a safe home, a steady roof, a mother who could give him more than second-hand shoes and meals stretched thin. Her gaze fell again on the eviction notice taped to the wall. The date circled in angry black ink was tomorrow, tomorrow. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until her finger landed on the name she swore she would never call again. Ethan Blake. Ethan, the man who had once owned her heart with his smooth voice and cruel smile. The man who had promised her the world in late-night whispers, then vanished when she needed him most. He had been her boss, her lover, her downfall. He had left her with nothing but broken trust and a child he refused to claim. The memory burned fresh, as if it had happened yesterday. The office lights dim, his cologne still clinging to her skin, the weight of his betrayal as he slipped out of her life without a word. Her thumb hovered above the call button. Rage pushed her forward. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. Her voice tore free before she could stop it. "You don't know what I've suffered because of you," she hissed, each syllable sharpened by months of pain. "I will destroy you and your career if you can't accept me and your son." Her chest heaved. Her knuckles whitened around the phone. She didn't wait for a reply. She slammed her thumb against the screen, ending the call, her whole body trembling as if she had just fought a battle. The silence afterward was deafening. Amara dropped onto the worn sofa, pressing her palms to her face. Her heart thundered, hot tears sliding down her cheeks. For a fleeting second, the release felt almost good. Finally, she had spat the venom she had bottled for years. Finally, she had screamed the truth Ethan refused to hear. But then the air shifted. The room felt smaller, colder. Her phone buzzed against her palm. Unknown number. Her throat tightened. She didn't answer. The buzz came again, louder, insistent. With a shaky breath, she pressed accept and lifted the phone to her ear. A voice, low and edged with steel, filled the line. "You have 5 minutes to open the door," the stranger said, every word deliberate, lethal, "or I'll break it down." Amara froze. Her eyes darted toward the door, then to the shadowed window where the night pressed close. She stumbled to her feet, legs weak, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the echo of her breath. And then she saw them. Through the thin curtain, black shapes slid into the street below. Sleek SUVs lined the curb, engines humming like predators waiting to pounce. Men in dark coats stepped out, their movements precise, dangerous. Their footsteps echoed off the pavement as they spread across the entrance of her building. Amara's mouth went dry. This wasn't Ethan. This wasn't her ex-boss with his careless cruelty. She had called someone else, someone far worse. The phone slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a soft thud. A knock rattled the thin wood of her door. Not a polite knock, a demand. The sound reverberated through her bones. Her pulse skittered wildly. She clutched the hem of her shirt, forcing her body to move, forcing air into her lungs. Noah stirred faintly in the next room, his small voice murmuring in his sleep. She prayed he wouldn't wake. Another knock, harder this time. The voice returned, muffled but clear, leaking through the cracks around the doorframe. "Open it!" Her feet carried her forward, each step heavier than the last. Her hand trembled on the doorknob, the silence stretched, taut and breathless. Then the bell rang, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed in her skull. Amara swallowed hard, twisted the knob, and pulled. The door swung open, and there he stood. Tall, immovable, with eyes as dark as midnight storms and a presence that filled the entire hallway. His suit was cut to perfection, his jaw shadowed by stubble, his gaze fixed on her with a weight that stole her breath. Luca Romano, the Mafia king. The breath in Amara's chest froze the instant her eyes locked onto him. The man at her door was not Ethan Blake. He was taller, broader, his presence filling the narrow hallway as though the very walls bent to make space for him. His black suit clung to a body sculpted by discipline and danger, his dark hair slicked back with an effortless arrogance that matched the glint in his storm-grey eyes. Those eyes fixed on her with a focus that made her skin prickle, as though he could read every secret she had ever buried. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She thought of Ethan, of her fury, of the venomous words she had spat into the phone. And then, like a cold blade across her memory, she realized the truth. She had dialed the wrong number. The name Ethan had whispered months ago in one of his drunken boasts surfaced now like a curse. Romano, Luca Romano, the Mafia king. Amara's knees weakened, but she clutched the doorframe, forcing herself to stand tall. She could not appear fragile. Not in front of this man, not in front of the predator whose reputation could silence entire city blocks. His voice was deep, carrying the weight of authority that allowed no argument. "You have something to say to me, little woman." His accent curled around his words, smooth but sharp, like velvet hiding a dagger. Her throat tightened. I think there's been a mistake." The faintest curl tugged at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes remained merciless. "A mistake? You threatened to destroy me. My career. My name. Tell me, Amara Ellis, how does a secretary plan to destroy the king of this city?" Her stomach dropped. He knew her name. He hadn't asked. He already knew. The realization struck like thunder. This man had power that stretched far beyond her comprehension, and she had stumbled directly into its center. She shook her head, words tumbling over each other. "I wasn't talking to you. I didn't even mean to." He raised a hand, and her protest choked off instantly. "Excuses bore me. I deal in truths." His gaze slid past her shoulder, into the dim apartment where the faint sound of soft coughing came from the bedroom. Luca's expression changed. The steel in his eyes didn't soften, but it sharpened into something else. Protective, possessive, dangerous. "Who's in there?" Amara's heart pounded. "My son. He's sick." For the first time, his mask shifted, revealing a flicker of humanity, though it was veiled beneath layers of control. Without waiting for permission, Luca stepped inside. His men followed, their heavy boots thudding across the worn carpet. They fanned out like shadows, opening closets, peering under furniture, checking corners with the precision of soldiers. Amara stumbled after him, fury and fear colliding in her chest. You can't just barge into my home." His hand shot out, catching her wrist. His grip wasn't cruel, but it was unyielding, his strength coiled and absolute. He leaned close, his breath brushing her ear, and whispered in a tone that was both a warning and a promise. "You called me. Now you live with the consequences." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry before this man, not when Noah needed her to be strong. From the bedroom, her son whimpered again. Luca released her and strode toward the sound. Amara darted in front of him, spreading her arms as though her small body could shield Noah from the storm standing in her living room. "Stay away from him," she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. Luca stopped. His gaze bore into her, measuring her defiance. Then he tilted his head slightly, almost curious. "You would stand against me? For him?" Her chin lifted. "He's all I have." The silence stretched, thick and dangerous. Then, slowly, Luca nodded once. His voice was quieter when he spoke again, but no less commanding. "Then hear me, Amara Ellis. You have entangled yourself in my world. That child is now marked, whether you like it or not. And in my world, weakness is blood in the water." Her breath caught, fear lancing through her veins. He continued, his words deliberate, final. "From this moment, you and your son belong under my protection. Whether you accept it or not." Amara shook her head in disbelief. No, I don't want your protection. I want you to leave. You don't understand. I made a mistake." His eyes flashed. Mistakes carry consequences. He motioned with a flick of his hand. Two of his men moved forward, their presence towering, impenetrable. Before she could resist, before she could even reach for Noah's door, Luca's grip closed around her elbow, firm but not cruel, guiding her toward the hall. "You're coming with me. Both of you." She twisted in his hold. "You can't just take us." He didn't slow, didn't flinch. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Watch me." Her protest turned into a gasp as she was ushered out into the night air. Black SUVs lined the street like predators lying in wait, their engines purring low. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, but no one dared to step outside. No one ever interfered when the name Romano lingered in the air. They guided her to the largest SUV. Luca opened the door himself, his hand steady on her back, as though daring her to defy him. Noah stirred inside the apartment, his cry carrying faintly, and Amara's heart cracked. She tried to turn, but Luca's grip tightened. "He's already in the car," he murmured, and her stomach dropped at how quickly his men had moved. She slid into the seat, her pulse hammering, her mind racing with every possible escape that didn't exist. Luca followed, closing the door behind him with finality. The vehicle rumbled forward, swallowed by the night. Amara pressed against the door, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this?" "I'm not your enemy." Luca turned his head slowly, his gaze sweeping over her as though memorizing every flicker of her fear. "No, but you made yourself part of my story tonight. And in my world, stories end one of two ways: under my hand or under my shield." Her chest tightened, her breaths shallow. "Then what do you plan to do with us?" His answer was low, heavy, threaded with promise. "Keep you alive." Before she could respond, the sharp crack of gunfire split the night. Glass shattered beside her, shards exploding inward as the SUV swerved violently. Amara screamed, throwing her arms over her head as the bullet tore through the air where her skull had been moments before. The vehicle fishtailed, tires screeching. Luca lunged across the seat, shielding her with his own body as another shot rang out. His voice thundered through the chaos, cold and furious. "Sniper!" Amara's heart nearly stopped. The bullet wasn't meant for him. It was meant for her. The SUV tore through the night, armored engines growling like beasts. Amara pressed Noah to her chest, trembling as shards of glass clung to her hair. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out the chaos outside. Luca barked orders in Italian, his voice steady even as bullets screamed against the metal shell of the vehicle. When the gunfire finally faded, when the world slowed from its violent spiral, she dared to lift her gaze. Luca was still shielding her with his body, his hand firm on her shoulder, his eyes locked onto hers, grey steel shadowed by fury. "You see now," he said quietly, deadly calm. "This is no mistake anymore. They wanted you dead." Her throat closed. She wanted to deny it, to tell herself the sniper had aimed for him, but the truth was, carved in Luca's gaze, the shot had been for her. By the time they reached the mansion, the night air had curdled into silence. Black iron gates yawned open, closing behind them like the jaws of a trap. The estate loomed above, sprawling and cold, its windows glowing faintly against the darkness. Amara felt swallowed whole as she was ushered inside, her trembling legs barely keeping pace. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Shadows of guards shifted at the edges, armed men blending with the grandeur. Everything screamed power, wealth, danger. She clutched Noah tighter, the boy blinking sleepily against her shoulder, unaware of the storm unraveling around them. Luca dismissed his men with a flick of his hand. Only silence remained. He poured a glass of whiskey, his movements precise, deliberate. Then he turned to her. "You're Ethan Blake," he said, rolling the name like poison on his tongue. "Do you know what he's done?" Her stomach knotted. She shook her head. "He sold me out," Luca continued, voice sharp as glass. "He handed files, my business, my secrets, to men who would love nothing more than to see me bleed. And you," his eyes narrowed, piercing through her, "you called me, threatened me. Do you see the position you've put yourself in?" Amara's breath caught. Her knees felt weak. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what he did." Luca studied her for a long moment, then downed the whiskey in a single swallow. "I should end you where you stand. For less, men have died." The words sliced her in two. Fear coiled around her ribs, but anger sparked in her chest. She straightened, meeting his gaze with fire she didn't know she had left. "Then do it. Kill me. But don't you dare touch my son." Something flickered across his face. Not pity, not mercy, but interest. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not afraid for yourself, only for him." She lifted her chin, holding her ground. "He's all that matters." A soft sound made them both glance down. Noah peeked at Luca from where he clung to his mother's skirt. His eyes were wide but curious. "Mama," he whispered. "That's the man with scary eyes but kind voice." Luca stilled. His gaze lingered on the boy, and for the briefest moment, the mask of the Mafia king cracked. Something older, quieter, more human passed through his eyes before he looked away. He turned sharply, barking orders to a guard. "Set rooms. The boy stays safe. No one touches them without my word." That night, Amara wandered the halls, unable to sleep. The mansion was a labyrinth of wealth and shadows, every corner heavy with secrets. She found herself drawn to an office left slightly ajar. Inside, papers lay scattered across a mahogany desk. Curiosity warred with fear, but desperation won. She sifted through the documents, her hands trembling as she uncovered names, numbers, coded messages, and then Ethan's name. Her breath hitched. The files told a story far darker than betrayal of love. Ethan hadn't only abandoned her, he had been feeding Luca's rivals, the very men who had sent the sniper tonight. Her ex-boss, her ex-lover, the father of her child, had sold them all out. She staggered back from the desk, the weight of betrayal pressing down until her knees nearly buckled. Tears blurred her vision, but fury steadied her spine. Ethan hadn't just destroyed her life, he had placed Noah in the crosshairs of monsters. Hours later, exhaustion dragged her into bed, though sleep was a fragile shield. The mansion hummed with silence, guards stationed outside her door. She curled around Noah, his tiny hand resting on her arm, his breaths even and soft. For a fleeting moment she almost believed they were safe. But safety was a lie. A creak woke her. Cold air slithered across her skin. She opened her eyes and froze. A masked intruder loomed at the bedside, a knife gleaming in his hand. The blade hovered over Noah's small chest, catching the moonlight that spilled through the curtains. Amara's scream lodged in her throat, her body paralyzed between terror and the instinct to throw herself between her son and the steel. The shadow leaned closer, the knife trembling inches above the boy, and the world held its breath. The blade glinted in the dark, so close Amara could see her reflection in its steel. Her breath stopped in her chest, terror anchoring her to the mattress. Noah shifted in his sleep, unaware of the death looming inches away. Amara tried to move, tried to scream, but fear locked her throat and limbs. Her mind screamed one word over and over, protect, but her body would not obey. The sound came like thunder, heavy boots pounding against marble, the door crashing inward, wood splintering under force. The intruder turned, startled, and in that split second, Luca Romano filled the doorway like a shadow torn from hell itself. His pistol fired, the roar deafening in the confined room. The bullet found its mark, striking the masked man's chest and hurling him backward. The knife clattered uselessly to the floor. Amara's cry broke free at last, ragged and raw. She clutched Noah close as the intruder collapsed, blood soaking the carpet. For a heartbeat, the world was silent, except for Noah's small, confused whimper and the thud of Luca's boots as he strode forward. He holstered his weapon with practiced calm, then bent and swept Noah into his arms. The boy blinked up at him, wide-eyed, frightened yet strangely trusting, as if some instinct told him this terrifying man was safety itself. Luca's jaw clenched, his grey eyes storm-dark as they flicked over the child, checking, ensuring. When he spoke, his voice was softer, roughened with something Amara had never heard before. "He's safe. He's unharmed." Her knees gave out. She sank onto the edge of the bed, hands trembling so violently she could barely hold herself upright. She stared at the lifeless body on her floor, the dark stain spreading wider, and for the first time since this nightmare began, the reality of her situation crashed into her chest. Her ex had betrayed her. Her enemies were faceless and merciless, and she had no shield but the man standing in her room. Luca turned, still cradling Noah, and his voice cut through her panic with steel-bound certainty. "As long as you're under my roof, no one touches you or your boy. Not while I breathe." The words sank deep, anchoring her spinning world. Amara pressed a hand to her mouth, sobs shaking her, tears slipping hot and unchecked down her cheeks. For the first time in months she wasn't standing alone against the storm. Yet that truth was as terrifying as it was comforting. Guards rushed in, dragging the corpse away, securing the perimeter. Luca issued commands with clipped precision, never once loosening his grip on the child. When the chaos died down, he finally set Noah back in bed, smoothing the boy's hair with surprising gentleness. Noah curled into the blankets, clutching his stuffed bear, already drifting back into innocent dreams. Luca straightened, and only then did Amara see the crimson streak across his forearm, blood seeping through the sleeve of his shirt. Her gasp broke through the silence. "You're hurt." He glanced down, as if it were nothing more than an inconvenience. "It's a scratch." She rose on unsteady legs, wiping at her wet face, and shook her head. "Sit down." His brows lifted, amused by her sudden command, but something in her eyes must have told him not to argue. With a quiet sigh, he lowered himself into the chair by the bedside. She hurried to fetch a cloth, her hands still trembling as she returned. Kneeling before him, she pressed the damp fabric to his wound. The contact was electric. She felt the heat of his skin, the steady thrum of his pulse beneath her fingers. He watched her closely, his gaze heavy, unblinking. Every brush of her hand drew the air tighter between them, every breath louder, sharper. "You didn't have to risk yourself," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not for me, not for us." His lips curved into something caught between a smirk and a confession. "I don't risk, I decide. And tonight, I decided you are mine to protect." Her chest tightened, a warmth unfurling inside her despite the blood on the floor and the terror still clinging to her bones. She dabbed the cloth gently along his arm, trying not to shiver beneath the intensity of his gaze. His hand lifted, almost without thought, brushing a tear from her cheek with the back of his knuckle. The touch unraveled her. For weeks, months, she had been fighting, carrying burdens alone, keeping walls high to shield herself and her son. And here, in the eyes of a man she should have feared most, she saw a promise of strength, of protection, of something dangerously close to tenderness. The silence between them deepened, thickened, pulling them closer. His breath mingled with hers, his face lowering, his lips a whisper from hers. The world shrank to that single moment, that single possibility. Her pulse raced, her heart leaping at the edge of something forbidden, something inevitable. The door burst open. Marco, Luca's second, stormed in, his expression grim. "Boss," he said sharply, ignoring the scene before him. "We found him." "Ethan Blake has been spotted in the city." Amara froze, her blood running cold at the name. Luca's lips hovered near hers, their almost kiss shattered by the intrusion. His eyes flicked to Marco, hardening once more into the steel mask of the Mafia king. The spell was broken. Marco's voice cut through the fragile silence like a blade, shattering the near kiss that lingered between Amara and Luca. "Ethan's been spotted," Marco said, his breath ragged, his eyes sharp with urgency. "Downtown, near the old railway depot." The name struck Amara like lightning. Her chest tightened, rage and pain mixing in a storm she could barely contain. Ethan, the man who had used her, discarded her, left her to bear their child alone, the man who had ruined her life. Luca straightened, his jaw tightening, the warmth in his eyes cooling into steel. "Then it's time we end this," he growled. Amara rose quickly, her pulse racing. "No," she whispered, then louder. "No, I have to see him." "I need to." Luca's gaze snapped to her, his tone flat, dangerous. "You don't know what you're asking, Amara." She met his stare with trembling determination. "I do. You want him for what he's done to you. But I want him for what he did to me, to Noah. He stole everything, Luca. My life, my dignity, my future. I won't hide behind anyone when I finally face him." For a moment the room was silent, except for the distant tick of the grandfather clock. Then Luca exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. "If you want to face him, you won't go alone. I'll set the trap. But you'll stay where I can see you." Amara nodded, though her heart thudded in her chest like a drum. That night, the city streets shimmered with the glow of street lamps as Luca's black SUV cut through the darkness. Marco drove, his hand steady on the wheel, while Luca sat beside him, radiating danger. Amara sat in the back, her fingers gripping the edge of her coat, her stomach twisting with dread. The abandoned railway depot loomed ahead, a skeletal reminder of the past. Rusted tracks stretched into darkness, and shattered glass crunched beneath the SUV's tires as they rolled to a stop. Luca's men fanned out silently, shadows among shadows, rifles gleaming faintly under the moonlight. "Stay behind me," Luca ordered, his voice low but sharp enough to slice through her nerves. Amara stepped onto the cracked pavement, the night air biting her skin. She could hear her own breathing, too loud, too fast. And then, out of the darkness, he appeared. Ethan Blake. Tall, sharp-jawed, with the same cold smirk she remembered. But his eyes held something new, a venom that made her skin crawl. He strolled toward them with mock confidence, his hands shoved into his coat pockets as though he owned the night. "Amara," he drawled, his voice dripping with disdain. "Still dramatic as ever. I see you've upgraded." His gaze flicked to Luca, then back to her. "Though I doubt even Romano can hide the truth of what you are." Amara's throat burned. She stepped forward despite Luca's arm barring her. "You ruined me," she said, her voice breaking and rising all at once. "You left me to raise our son alone, and you dare show your face?" Ethan laughed. cold and merciless. "Our son, don't flatter yourself. That boy is nothing but a mistake." The words struck like a blade to her chest. Fury surged, hot and unyielding. Without thinking, Amara raised her hand and slapped him hard across the face. The crack echoed through the hollow depot. Ethan's smirk faltered, his eyes flashing with hatred. He leaned closer, his voice a hiss. "If I can't have my son, no one will." Not even Romano Luca's gun was in his hand in a flash, pointed at Ethan's chest, his body taut with lethal promise. "Say that again, and it's the last words you ever speak," he growled. But before the tension could snap, the night exploded. Gunfire erupted from the shadows, bullets sparking off metal beams, the air splitting with the deafening roar of chaos. Luca shoved Amara behind him as his men shouted, returning fire. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like violent fireworks. Amara's scream caught in her throat as she ducked low, her ears ringing, her body trembling. She could see figures emerging, men with hard eyes and Russian accents barking orders. The Bratva. "Ambush!" Marco shouted, diving for cover. Luca fired with deadly precision, every movement sharp, controlled. He was a storm unleashed, his voice carrying above the din. "Keep her safe!" But in the chaos, hands like iron clamped around Amara's arms. She cried out, twisting, fighting, but the grip was brutal. Two Bratva men dragged her backward, their faces masked, their intentions clear. "No! Let me go!" she screamed, her voice raw with terror, her eyes locked on Luca, desperate, pleading. "Luca!" He turned, his face a mask of fury, his gun raised, but too many enemies swarmed, cutting him off. His shout tore through the night like thunder. "Amara!" Her heart pounded as she kicked, clawed, thrashed against the men pulling her into the shadows. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was Luca's figure, fighting like a beast possessed, his eyes burning with a promise. He would come for her. Her scream echoed across the depot as the Bratva dragged her away, and the night closed in around her like a cage. Amara is ripped from Luca's grasp, her voice breaking as she screams his name, while the Russians vanish into the shadows. Amara's scream still echoed in her ears as the Bratva men shoved her into the back of a van. The stench of gasoline and cold metal filled her lungs, choking her as panic clawed at her chest. She tried to fight, tried to push back with every ounce of strength she had left, but her wrists were bound, her cries smothered by the roar of the engine. Noah's face flashed before her eyes, and then Luca's, the last glimpse she'd had of him, fire blazing in his gaze as she was torn from his reach. She prayed he wouldn't stop until he found her. The van screeched to a halt, and the men dragged her through a maze of corridors that smelled of mold and rust. She was thrown into a dimly lit room, her body slamming against the floor. A heavy lock clicked shut behind her. Alone in the suffocating silence, Amara's body trembled, not only from fear, but from rage. She thought of Ethan, of his venomous sneer, of his betrayal that had led her into this nightmare. Tears welled, but she bit them back, refusing to give the Bratva her weakness. Hours blurred, her throat burned from thirst, shadows shifted beneath the crack of the door, and then chaos. The sound of gunfire rattled the walls. Men shouted in Russian, their voices frantic. The door burst open, and through the smoke he appeared, Luca Romano. His shirt was ripped, blood streaked across his arms, his eyes burning like wildfire. He looked like a storm personified, merciless and unstoppable, yet the moment his gaze landed on her, his fury softened into raw desperation. He strode forward, cut down the guard who dared to lunge at him, and then dropped to his knees beside her. "Amara," he whispered, voice hoarse but fierce. "I thought I'd lost you." Her breath hitched as his hands, trembling with unspoken fear, pulled her into his chest. For a moment, the world fell away. The Bratva, Ethan, danger. Everything melted into the steady thrum of his heartbeat. His scent, smoke, leather, and something undeniably him, wrapped around her like a shield. She clung to him, burying her face against his shoulder, as if her soul recognized he was the only anchor she had left. In one swift motion, he lifted her into his arms, holding her as though she weighed nothing. Bullets cracked in the distance, but Luca didn't flinch. He carried her through the chaos, every stride a promise carved into stone. No one would ever take her from him again. Back at the mansion, the world seemed to breathe again. Noah was safe, Marco was on guard, the threat temporarily contained. But Amara wasn't. Her heart still raced, her skin still burned with the imprint of his hands. When Luca led her into his private chamber, closing the door behind them, the silence between them roared louder than any battlefield. Her voice broke as she finally whispered, "You came for me." His jaw clenched, eyes darkening with emotion. "I told you, as long as you're under my roof, no one touches you." But the truth is, he stepped closer, his breath brushing her skin. "It's more than that now. I haven't felt alive in years, Amara. Not until your mistake brought you crashing into my world." Her lips parted, 1,000 protests dying on her tongue. The air between them thickened, charged, alive with something neither could deny. And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was fire and fury, fear and relief. Everything they hadn't said poured into one searing touch. His lips claimed hers with a hunger that left her trembling, yet beneath the heat, there was tenderness, a reverence that made her heart ache. She melted into him, her hands sliding over the hard planes of his chest, feeling the rapid thunder of his pulse. Clothes became meaningless, discarded like the walls they had both carried for too long. Each touch was a revelation, his calloused hands cradling her face with surprising gentleness, her fingers tracing the scars that told the story of his battles. They moved together in a rhythm that felt both inevitable and dangerous, as though the universe itself had conspired to bind them in this single fragile night. When his forehead rested against hers, his breath ragged, he murmured, "You don't belong in this darkness, but I can't let you go. Not now. Not ever." She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt safe, desired, alive. For the first time since Ethan's betrayal, since the loneliness that had nearly consumed her, Amara allowed herself to feel, not just the ache of survival, but the rush of being wanted. The night stretched on, a blur of whispered promises and unspoken fears, until exhaustion claimed them both. She fell asleep in his arms, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, as though daring the world to try and take her from him again. But peace was fleeting. In the early hours of dawn, Amara stirred. She slipped from the bed, wrapped in his shirt, and padded softly down the hall in search of water. That was when she heard it, a voice hushed and sharp, echoing from Luca's study. She froze, her heart thudding. It was Elena, Luca's sister. Amara pressed closer, breath caught in her throat, as Elena whispered into the phone. "Yes, the Bratva still has leverage. He doesn't suspect me. Keep the pressure on. Romano won't be able to protect her forever." The glass slipped from Amara's trembling hands, shattering against the floor. Elena's voice cut off. Silence. And then the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps turning toward the door. Cliffhanger. Amara stood frozen in the hall, Luca's shirt clutched around her as Elena's shadow fell across her. Amara froze in the dim corridor, Luca's shirt clutched to her chest, her pulse hammering against her ribs. The echo of Elena's whispered betrayal still rang in her ears, sharp and venomous, more chilling than the Bratva's gunfire. Shadows stretched long across the marble floor as Elena's figure turned, her eyes narrowing, her lips curving into a smile too sharp to be sisterly. "Couldn't sleep, little guest." Elena's voice dripped with mock sweetness, but her gaze was knives. Amara's throat tightened, words clawing up but dying before they could escape. She forced herself to move, to stumble back toward the safety of Luca's room, but Elena stepped forward, heels clicking like a metronome of doom. Amara's heart thundered as she whispered, "He'll find out." "He'll know." Elena tilted her head, the faint glow from the chandelier glinting off her eyes. "Oh, he'll know, but only when it's too late." Her hand brushed against the phone in her pocket, and Amara felt cold terror seep through her veins. The door at the end of the hall creaked. Luca's voice cut through the suffocating air. "Amara!" In that instant, she broke free, darting toward him. She collided with his chest, her fingers digging into his arm as she gasped. "It's her, Luca, she's with them." The room shifted. His dark eyes hardened like granite, snapping from Amara's trembling form to his sister's unreadable expression. "Elena," he said, the name heavy, a warning and a wound all at once. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a taut rope ready to snap. Elena smirked. "Finally. You always said I was ambitious. Did you really think I'd spend my life in your shadow?" Amara clung to him, trembling as his arm wrapped around her protectively. "She wants you dead," Amara whispered, her voice cracking. Elena's laugh was soft, cruel, and unflinching. "Dead, yes. Not because I hate you, brother, because I want what you've built. You've grown soft, distracted by her." She flicked her eyes at Amara like spitting venom. "An empire can't survive on weakness." Luca's jaw clenched, his breath sharp. "Family or not, betray me again, and I'll treat you as I would any enemy." But Elena only smiled wider, like she'd already won. The next night, Luca gathered his men. The mansion buzzed with tension, every corner filled with whispered commands, every shadow thick with unease. Amara sat in the library with Noah, holding him close, trying to quiet her panic with the sound of his steady breathing. Yet her ears caught fragments of Luca's orders, traps, fortifications, men stationed at every gate. When he returned to her side, his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek as though grounding himself. "You did the right thing telling me. But this war won't wait, Amara. I have to end it before it consumes us." Her lips trembled. "And if she kills you? What happens to Noah? To me?" His silence was answer enough. That night the storm broke. Eleanor revealed her hand fully. She wasn't just playing with whispers. She walked into Luca's office, chin high, flanked by strangers with cold eyes and Bratva tattoos etched into their skin. At her side was Ethan. Amara's breath caught when she saw him. Older, crueler, eyes glinting with triumph. He smirked at her from across the room as though he owned her still. "You always run to powerful men, Amara. First me, then him. But in the end, you'll crawl back to the devil you know." Her stomach turned, fury and terror mingling until her voice shook. "Noah is not yours. He never was." Ethan's smile faded, replaced by venom. "Then neither of you will have him." Luca's hand shot to his gun, but Eleanor raised hers first. "Enough! This isn't about the boy. This is about power. And brother, you've already lost." The tension snapped. Guns raised, voices clashed, the fragile walls of family crumbling into open war. Luca dragged Amara back, shielding her with his body as Marco and the men flooded the room. Ethan sneered, retreating into the shadows with Elena and her allies, but his parting words carved themselves into the air. "You won't hold this fortress for long." The night fell heavy with foreboding. Hours later, as dawn broke pale and weak across the sky, Amara finally let Noah drift to sleep beside her in one of the guest rooms. Her eyelids sagged, exhaustion threatening to claim her, when the first explosion ripped through the morning stillness. The ground shook beneath her feet, glass shattering, alarms blaring. She grabbed Noah, clutching him to her chest, heart hammering as the roar of chaos engulfed the estate. Marco's shouts echoed down the halls, men scrambled, and smoke began to choke the air. From outside came the unmistakable thunder of war. The Bratva had come, their assault merciless and unrelenting. Fire licked the sky, gates torn open by blasts, and the sound of gunfire rained like a storm. Amara's screams tangled with Noah's cries as she staggered through the halls, desperate to find Luca. But the corridors became a battlefield, men colliding, bullets flying. Her only thought was survival, her only anchor the fragile heartbeat of the child in her arms. And then, as the smoke thickened, as the walls trembled and fire painted the night in shades of blood, she realized with icy dread, she and Noah were trapped inside. Cliffhanger. Flames roared outside the shattered windows, the mansion groaning under the weight of the attack, as Amara clutched her son and whispered Luca's name into the chaos, praying he would find her before the Bratva did. Smoke clawed at Amara's throat as she pressed Noah against her chest, stumbling through the choking haze of the burning corridor. His small hands clutched her shirt, his cries muffled by the thunder of explosions rattling the estate. Every window shone with firelight, every hallway shook beneath the Bratva's assault. She whispered Luca's name over and over, a prayer, a plea, a desperate tether in the chaos. The door at the end of the corridor burst open. For a heartbeat she thought it was the Bratva. But then his shadow filled the frame. Luca Romano, his suit torn, blood streaked across his temple, eyes blazing with fury and determination. Relief broke her like a wave, her knees buckling as she cried out his name. He swept to her side, one arm circling her waist, the other reaching for Noah. "Stay behind me," he ordered, voice low and unshakable. Gunfire cracked, and he fired back with lethal precision, every bullet a shield between them and death. His men swarmed the halls, clashing with Bratva soldiers, the mansion trembling with the storm of war. Through the carnage, Ethan emerged. His grin was feral, his eyes lit with madness. "You should have stayed with me, Amara," he sneered, raising his gun. "You were mine before him. You'll be mine after he's gone." Luca pushed Amara and Noah behind him, his chest rising and falling with controlled rage. "Touch her, and you die here." The world narrowed to the two men, predator against predator. Ethan lunged first, a wild shot grazing Luca's shoulder. Amara screamed, clutching Noah tighter as Luca moved like a shadow unleashed. He caught Ethan's wrist, twisted, drove him to the ground with brutal force. The fight was vicious, raw, fists, knees, the crunch of bone. At last, Luca pinned him, Ethan's own gun shoved beneath his chin. Ethan laughed, blood spilling down his mouth. "You'll never be free of me." She'll always remember Amara's voice broke through the smoke. "End this, Luca. End it before he takes more from us." Luca's finger tightened on the trigger. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the shot rang out, final and deafening. Ethan's body went still, his laughter snuffed out forever. Amara flinched, burying her face in Noah's hair as tears streamed down her cheeks, not of grief, but of release. Ethan could never hurt them again. The battle raged on, but the tide was turning. Luca's men forced the Bratva back, their bodies littering the grounds. Flames licked the gates, smoke curled to the sky, but the fortress held. And then Elena appeared, dragged into the great hall by Marco, her wrists bound, her eyes cold with defiance. Luca faced her, chest heaving, blood still dripping from his knuckles. For a long, unbearable moment, no one moved. Sister and brother locked eyes, two halves of the same legacy. "You betrayed me," Luca said, voice ablade. "You were weak," Elena spat, blinded by her. "You were never fit to lead." His men waited for the command, eager to end her treachery. Amara's breath caught. She expected him to pull the trigger as he had with Ethan. But instead, Luca closed his eyes for the briefest instant, then opened them, steel hard. "Family once," he murmured. "Enemy now, but I won't stain my hands with your blood." He turned to Marco. "Take her. She leaves Italy tonight. If she returns, she dies." Elena's scream echoed through the mansion as she was dragged away, her fury swallowed by the smoke of defeat. At last, silence. The war was over. Luca turned back to Amara, his gaze softer now, though shadows still lingered there. He approached her slowly, as though afraid she might vanish. Noah peeked from behind her, his small hand slipping into Luca's, innocent trust bridging the chasm of blood and violence. Luca's voice dropped to a low, almost broken tone. "It's done. The Bratva is crushed. Ethan is gone. My sister removed. Now only one choice remains." Amara swallowed, heart pounding. "What choice?" He looked at her as though she were the only light in the room. "I promised you freedom. I'll give it. New names, new lives, a chance to disappear, or..." He stepped closer, cupping her face in his blood-stained hands, his eyes searching hers with unguarded truth. Or you stay, not as my prisoner, not as my mistake, but as my equal, my queen. Her breath caught, emotions crashing like waves, the weight of everything, fear, survival, love, betrayal, pressed on her shoulders. She looked down at Noah, at his wide eyes shining with innocence, at the way his small fingers curled trustingly around Luca's hand. "Mama," Noah whispered softly, a smile tugging at his lips. "I like him." Her heart cracked open, the decision spilling free. She raised her eyes to Luca, tears glittering but her voice steady. "I choose you, not because I have to, because I want to. Because this mistake, it became my destiny." Luca's breath shuddered out, his forehead pressing to hers as if her words had saved him from drowning. He kissed her then, not with desperation, but with reverence, sealing their fate with fire and tenderness. Later, as the fires were quenched and the battlefield cleared, the three of them stood together on the balcony of the rebuilt mansion. Below, the city stretched wide and alive, its lights blazing against the night. The air carried the scent of smoke and renewal, the promise of a future written in shadows and stars.